There's Rogue. He's waiting eagerly for me to let him outside and play with him. All right, so starting off, we have the compost bin. Made a couple of improvements to this to retain the moisture. Here in Colorado, it's really difficult to keep compost moist, so I've put in some cardboard around the edges here, and that should hopefully help a little bit, although I do find I have to keep watering it pretty regularly. So this is the compost from last year, and it's taken a little bit of time to decompose down into where I can use it in the garden beds, but that's because the climate here is really arid and tends to dry out. Over here I've got some new compost getting started. So you can see here I've been putting some of the onion trimmings in here, as well as some other landscape trimming. So I'll put grass or just unwanted scraps from the kitchen, and then also like some landscape leftovers. So anyways, that's what's going on here. My plan is to have one where the compost is close to being ready, and that one I'll be able to use right away on the garden whenever it's done, and then I'll have one that's constantly being filled up, and so I'll alternate between the two whenever each of them is ready for putting the compost in the garden. This is my stack of wood and rubble. So anyways, this was scattered all over the yard a couple of years ago, and now it's not I wouldn't say it's ideal, but it's a good place to come and get scrap whenever I need stone or old pallet wood to work on any sort of project. And as you can see, I've used some of that already for the front of the compost, so it does come in handy. Doesn't look that great, but I think every garden should have some place where you keep all of your ugly stuff. That way it's out of the way, mostly out of sight, and then if you ever need some of the material, it's there and easy to use. So over here, this is new. I've gotten some landscape sapling containers, plastic containers. These are about 20 inches across, which might be a little bit small for the indeterminate tomatoes that I have in here, but I'm going to try it out. I did just recently purchase some of these stakes and support arms to create a tomato cage, and just transplanted these today. I started these tomatoes from seed, and what I have here are 3 Better Boy tomato plants. So this one right here is Better Boy, that's Better Boy, and that's the third Better Boy. This one's been struggling. This is a cherry tomato plant, and hasn't really done too well, so I kind of want to give it a chance outdoors. It may not make it, and what I'll end up doing is just going to Lowe's or Home Depot and pick up a more mature cherry tomato plant to replace it. But I'm going to give it a chance and see what it does. So it may survive, and hopefully it'll produce a lot of cherry tomatoes for us. This is going to be the pepper bed, and right here I have the pepper plants. I have 3 different types. I have poblanos, and I have some banana peppers and bell peppers. So these are looking pretty good and ready to transplant. I might do that this weekend or wait till next weekend. It might dip down into the 40s, which isn't great for peppers, and so I might wait until next weekend. But these are almost ready to go. And then I'm planting these in this bed this year. Last year I had the squash, and had 2 different types of squash, butternut and yellow squash or summer squash. And so want to rotate so that I can avoid any disease. This bed last year did pretty good with the butternut squash and the summer squash, but the leaves did get some diseases kind of later on in the season, and I think that's because the leaves are close to the soil and a lot of the water splashed up, and I think that's what caused it. So I'm going to try to be more careful with the squashes this year, but just to be safe, I'm not going to plant squash in this bed this year, just to avoid them from getting diseased. I'm going to move on to putting the peppers in here. I have the 2 different types. They're all fairly mild, but some of them are a little bit more spicy, so I'm going to put those a little bit closer together on one side, and then the bell peppers and banana peppers I'll put on the other side, since they're a little more mild. I don't want to cross-pollinate if I can avoid that, but anyways, it might happen anyway, because this is not a very large bed, and but we'll see. All right, so moving on. Over here we have some shallots, and just planted the slips there. So these were already grown to about 6 inches from the garden center, and just transplanted those in about 2 weeks ago. So never done shallots before. Really what I wanted were onions, but they were out of onions, so I thought shallots would be okay, and so that's what's going on there. Here you can see 4 rows of carrots, and those seedlings are coming up pretty good. So everything looks normal and ready to go. After maybe a week or two more, I will thin these out. They are still a little bit too close together, and what I want to go for is about 2 or 3 inches between each. So as you can see, there's a lot of bunching there from some of the seeds that were planted too close together, but you try to pick the best ones, keep those in, and then pull out the rest to appropriate spacing. I did just fertilize this with some 3-4-4 organic fertilizer, so that should be a slow release, and so hoping that that's going to improve my carrots. My carrots have tended to be short and fat. I'm looking for, you know, the really long and thinner carrots, and so I think what the reason that I haven't been able to do that yet is because I don't have enough potassium in the soil. So anyways, I'm learning as I go, and hopefully with more potassium, the root type vegetables will take better and produce a better harvest for those. And then around these stakes I have cucumbers, and I'm gonna use twine to create a lattice. These go up to about 8 feet, which the cucumber may not grow that high, but it'll get pretty close before the end of the summer. And so so I just planted those, and so we'll hopefully see those start to sprout here within the next week. In this mound and this mound right here, we have butternut squash. And so, anyways, I planted those about 2 feet apart. That should be enough spacing, and hoping to have a little bit better harvest from the butternut squash this year, and try to be more careful when I water that I don't splash up the soil onto the leaves to cause disease. Moving over to this bed, we have yellow squash or summer squash. So I have 4 mounds here. You can kind of see where those mounds are, where it's a little bit more wet. Been watering these as well as the cucumbers and butternut squash in the mornings until those seeds germinate and start to sprout, and then I'll start to be a little more careful with the water as not to overwater these. In this bed, we have a couple of potato plants, which I've decided to leave and just let those grow. There were potatoes in this bed last year, and so there were obviously some potatoes that I did not harvest from last year, and so those have started to sprout. So it's really cool to see the second generation of potatoes there. I'm just going to leave them and see what they do. The lighter green is where I have a variety of lettuce. Don't recall what kind it is, but it's doing very well. This is a type of lettuce that germinates and sprouts very quickly, and takes about 40 days to come to maturity. So hopefully in about 20 days I'll be able to start harvesting some of this lettuce, and we'll be able to enjoy some salads pretty early on in the season. All right, moving on to this next bed. This is one of my winter beds where I planted carrots here, onions here, and garlic all at about the same time, late October, early November, and they survived over the winter. Well, the garlic would have survived anyway, and but I think the onions and carrots would not have survived unless I had some de-icing cable here, which is used usually for keeping ice off of the northern exposure of roofs, so that the ice melts and you don't damage your roof. But YouTube University told me that I could put this in my garden bed and prolong a season. So that's how these carrots came to be, and these onions. So far I'm finding that the carrots are short and fat, and so like I said, I'm trying to avoid that in the other bed by adding a little bit more potassium. The leaves are really taking off, so there's plenty of nitrogen, but I just don't think there's been enough potassium in this bed to support the root style vegetables like onions and carrots and garlic. So I'll just show you this one right here. I'll pull it out. It's a good size at the top, but then tapers off really quickly, and not really what you want for a carrot. Although there's nothing wrong with this. This will be good for eating. Just would like to see more to eat. So that's the carrot bed. These onions are kind of doing the same thing, although I don't know, because they are starting to bulb out. They're starting to get a little bit fatter around the base, and they may end up turning into big, beautiful onions, but not sure yet. I'm thinking because this is the same bed as the carrots, that my issue is with not enough potassium, and for those root vegetables, I'm not getting really good bulb production. So we'll see. I did just trim these today to about 6 inches. I guess there's a debate on whether or not you should trim onions, but I did it just so that I could see what the heck was going on. The onions, because there was enough nitrogen, grew to about 2 feet high. So they were pretty high. They were about up to here, up to about knee level before they started bending over, and so they seem to be growing really well, except for the bulbs. But I'm going to give these a couple more weeks, maybe tops 1 month. It is Memorial Day weekend, so maybe until late June I'll let these go and see if they continue to get rounder and bigger, and then might have a good onion harvest. So this is still yet to be seen. They are a little bit cleared out. Both the carrots and onions are thinned out because I've been harvesting these a little bit early. Harvesting these early is a good way to get vegetables a little bit earlier on. But overall, pretty pleased and glad to see that some of my projects over the winter seem to work, and should be able to take these cold or cool season varieties and be able to grow them over the winters here in Colorado. And then the last bed is the potatoes. And so these are a mix of last year's potato that came from that bed right there. So there's about 10 plants kind of interspersed in this bed, along with some new potatoes that I got from the garden center. And so for instance, this one right here, or these right here, a couple of these plants right here, they're really tall, and they're already starting to produce buds. You can see right here there's some buds that are starting, and so these have been growing for maybe about a month and a half already. And I did plant these because this bed also has heating with the de-icing cables, but we did have a freeze that went down to about 5 degrees Fahrenheit I'd say maybe a month ago, and it did kill off most of the second generation potatoes that I harvested from last year's bed. But 10 of them did survive, and then maybe about 15 or so are from new potatoes from the garden center. So these are doing really well so far. They seem to be taking off pretty nicely, and so hoping to have a good potato harvest. I added the mulch here, and the reason I did that was because I've heard that it does help keep the soil moist for longer, so you don't have to use as much water, so it's good for conserving water, and also for keeping the bed moist here in the very dry climate. So this was my first time watering since adding this. I did add this a couple days ago, and I'm using soaker hose to water this. And what I noticed is I usually turn it on for about a half an hour, which I did this time, but for some reason when I added the mulch, it caused the bed to flood. So I don't know what's causing that. I don't know if it's keeping the water closer to the surface, but the water started to pour out of the sides of the bed, and it did seem as though the bed had gotten flooded. So not good to ever flood or overwater these beds, but I think I have pretty good drainage, so I'm going to be okay. So fingers crossed the potatoes won't rot underneath in the soil, and I can already see that the soil is starting to dry out. Still, though, not ideal to flood, and so now I know when I water this bed, maybe keep it to 15 minutes instead of the half an hour that I did earlier when I flooded it this morning. So anyway, we'll see. Everything's an experiment, and I'm learning as I go. And so that's the tour of the garden. And then here's the shed, which is getting to be more and more like a tiny home than a shed. But this is the heart and soul of the garden. Moved the stack of firewood to the front here. It was on the side, but I wanted to make room for the water the rainwater system that I have here. So I'm collecting rainwater from the roof, and it, as you can see, flows down from the gutter and down into these 55-gallon barrels. This water does go pretty quickly, but this is the limit that I can keep in Colorado. And any more than that, it would be illegal to store. So, anyways, this system's been working out pretty good. But I'm finding that because of how small that roof is, I'm not getting too much each time it rains. But anyways, it's a fun project to start. And we'll see if more rains will produce or collect more rainwater as we go further into the season. It's certainly not enough to keep all of my beds watered, so I will still have to use the city water. But anyways, I'm experimenting, and it was a really fun project to start, and hopefully we'll work in supplementing some of the water that I'll need in the garden. No real changes in here. Still have the potbelly coal stove, which has served me well a couple of nights when I come out here and just chill out in the shed. So this has been an amazing find for the garden and for the backyard, and creates a really nice cozy environment here to invite friends over for cigars and whiskey. And then over here, actually, this is new in this corner, so I put in these wire baskets and a shelf for my toolbox, and so far it's been working out really well. I had a bunch of this stuff just laying out on the floor, but it helps me stay a little bit more organized, and I think it looks pretty good too. At least it looks appropriate for the shed. And then still have the tool rack pegboard racks over here, and so I did install this last year, so this is not new, but it's been a lifesaver for helping me stay organized. I'm not the type of person that stays organized, and so it's good to get as much help as I can get from the pegboards, and it's been really motivating for me to stay organized so that I can move efficiently and produce a lot from the backyard. So that's the tour for spring 2022, and hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time.